Clint Eastwood spent 3 hours at a bar criticizing his own films with a stranger who had no idea who he was. The characters are flat. The dialogue is weak. When the bartender introduced them, what the critic said and what Clint said back left 20 people at the bar in tears from laughing. It was a Tuesday evening in September 2019, and Clint Eastwood had just finished a long day of post-production work on Cry Macho, which wouldn't be released until 2021. He was tired, his eyes hurt from staring at editing screens, and he wanted a quiet drink before heading home. He didn't want to go to any of the trendy Los Angeles spots where he'd be recognized immediately. He wanted a dive bar, the kind of place where people minded their own business. He found himself at the Rusty Nail, a small bar in Glendale that had been there since the 1960s. Dark wood, worn leather stools, a bartender who'd seen everything and cared about nothing except pouring good drinks. Perfect. Clint took a seat at the bar, ordered a whiskey, and settled in to decompress. The bar was moderately busy, maybe 20 people scattered around, mostly regulars who came for the cheap drinks and lack of pretension. Nobody looked at Clint twice. In the dim lighting, wearing a baseball cap and a plain jacket, he was just another old guy having a drink. 5 minutes later, a man in his mid-30s sat down on the stool next to Clint. He was holding a laptop bag and had the slightly rumpled look of someone who worked from coffee shops and bars. He ordered a beer, opened his laptop, and started typing furiously. Clint minded his own business, sipping his whiskey and enjoying the anonymity. But then the man next to him let out an audible groan of frustration and muttered, "Unbelievable." Clint glanced over. The man was staring at his laptop screen with disgust. "Everything okay?" Clint asked. He wasn't particularly interested, but the man seemed like he needed to vent, and Clint had learned over the years that sometimes people just needed to talk. The man looked at Clint, saw a friendly-looking elderly gentleman, and decided to unload. "Sorry, yeah, I'm a film critic. Well, blogger technically. And I just got assigned to review a Clint Eastwood retrospective for this online magazine, and I'm trying to figure out how to write 5,000 words about why his work is overrated without being too harsh." Clint took another sip of whiskey. "Overrated, huh?" "Completely. Don't get me wrong, he's a legend and all that, but objectively? His acting is one note, that squint, that growl, the stoic, silent type. It's the same performance in every movie. And his directing? Simplistic at best. No visual flair, no stylistic innovation. He just points the camera and shoots. It's competent, but it's not art." Clint nodded thoughtfully. "You make some good points." The man seemed pleased to have found someone who agreed. "Right? Everyone treats him like this untouchable icon, but if you actually analyze his work critically, there's not much depth there. His characters are flat, his plots are predictable, his dialogue is weak." "The dialogue is especially weak," Clint agreed. "Sometimes it feels like he's not even trying." The man laughed. "Exactly. Thank you. Finally someone who gets it. I thought I was going crazy. Everyone I know worships the guy." "What's your name?" Clint asked. "David. David Chen. You?" "Clint." David didn't even blink at the name. Why would he? Clint was a common enough name, and this old guy at a dive bar couldn't possibly be the Clint Eastwood. "So what do you do, Clint?" David asked. "I work in film." "Oh yeah, what do you do?" "Bit of everything. Directing mostly these days. Used to act." "Cool. Indie stuff?" "Some of it's gotten wide release." David took this to mean his new bar friend had worked on some straight-to-streaming projects that maybe got a limited theatrical run. "That's awesome, man. The indie scene is where the real innovation happens anyway. Not this Hollywood formula garbage." For the next 3 hours, Clint and David talked about film. And Clint Eastwood spent those 3 hours systematically criticizing every aspect of his own work. When David mentioned Unforgiven, Clint shook his head. "Overrated. Everyone acts like it's this profound meditation on violence, but it's just a revenge western with a thin veneer of philosophical pretension. The ending is exactly what you'd expect. No real subversion." David was ecstatic. "Yes, that's exactly what I've been saying. It won Best Picture and everyone treats it like it revolutionized the Western genre, but it's just fine. It's fine." The characters aren't even that complex, Clint continued. The protagonist is supposed to be this tortured soul, but we never really see the internal conflict. It's all surface level. When they moved on to $1 Million Baby, Clint was even harsher. Emotionally manipulative. The whole thing is designed to make you cry. There's no subtlety. It hits you over the head with the tragedy. And the ending is so predictable, David added. The moment you meet that character, you know exactly where it's going. The dialogue in that film is particularly weak, Clint said. Some of those lines are borderline embarrassing. They discussed Gran Torino. Clint, the racial stereotypes are uncomfortable. The white savior narrative is outdated. And that final scene, it's so obvious what's going to happen that it loses all impact. They talked about American Sniper. Clint, too one-sided. It doesn't really grapple with the moral complexity of the subject matter. It's a glorified war movie that pretends to be deeper than it is. David was typing notes furiously on his laptop. This is gold. This is exactly the kind of critical analysis the piece needs. Most people are too afraid to say this stuff because he's Clint Eastwood, but you're right about all of it. His acting is the real problem, though, Clint said. That same expression in every movie. How many times can you do the silent, tough guy routine before it becomes a parody of itself? That's what I've been trying to articulate, David said. It's not range, it's a shtick. A very successful shtick, but still a shtick. They were having such an engaged conversation that neither of them noticed the other bar patrons starting to recognize who Clint was. The bartender, Mike, had figured it out about an hour in. He'd been serving Clint for years whenever the director wanted a quiet drink. Mike had been watching this whole exchange with growing amusement, but he'd decided not to interrupt. This was too entertaining. Other regulars started to catch on, too. Sarah, who was sitting 3 stools down, had recognized Clint immediately, but had honored the unspoken barcode of leaving celebrities alone. But when she heard Clint absolutely destroying his own films, she nearly spit out her drink. She texted her husband, "You won't believe what I'm watching right now." More people in the bar were tuning into the conversation. Not obviously, this was a dive bar. People knew how to be subtle. But at least 20 people were now aware that Clint Eastwood was sitting at the bar, systematically trashing his entire filmography to a film critic who had no idea who he was talking to. Around the 3-hour mark, David's phone rang. He checked it. His editor probably wondering where that review was. I should probably wrap this up and actually write this piece. But seriously, thank you. This conversation has been incredibly helpful. You've given me the framework for the whole article. Glad I could help, Clint said. David closed his laptop and stood up to leave. As he did, Mike the bartender decided it was time to end this. Hey David, Mike called out. Before you go, I should probably introduce you two properly. David Chen, meet Clint Eastwood. Clint, this is David. David looked confused. Yeah, we introduced ourselves. His name is Clint. No, Mike said with a big grin. Clint Eastwood, the actor, the director, the guy whose work you've spent 3 hours criticizing, to his face. David's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, realization, horror, and finally, pure mortification. He looked at Clint, really looked at him, and saw what he'd been too busy ranting to notice: the face, the build, the unmistakable presence. Oh my God! The entire bar erupted. People who'd been watching this whole thing go down burst out laughing. Sarah was doubled over. A couple in the corner were applauding. Mike was wiping tears from his eyes. David's laptop slipped from his hands and clattered on the bar. Mr. Eastwood, I didn't... Oh my God, I just spent 3 hours telling you your own work is terrible. Clint was smiling. You did. And you had some good points. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. I didn't recognize you and I just... David, relax. You gave an honest critical assessment of my films. That's your job. You're allowed to think they're overrated. But I was so disrespectful. I called your acting a shtick. I said your dialogue was weak. You did. And I agreed with you. About most of it anyway. David didn't know what to do. Apologize more? Leave immediately? Beg forgiveness? Then Clint said something that made David, and everyone listening, realize why this moment would become legendary. Here's what you need to understand about criticism, David. If you can't handle someone criticizing your work, you're in the wrong business. Every film I've made has flaws. Some of them have a lot of flaws. You pointed out many of them accurately. The question isn't whether your criticism is valid. Some of it is. The question is, what are you going to do with that critical perspective? David was still frozen, not sure if this was a lesson or a gentle roast. You can write that review you were planning, Clint continued, the one that tears apart my work and calls it overrated. You've got the quotes now. Well, most of them from me. That'll get clicks. It'll be controversial. People will share it because the film critic who said Clint Eastwood's work is simplistic got vindicated by Clint himself. Or, David asked quietly, or you can write something more interesting. You can write about the gap between popular perception and critical analysis. You can explore why work that you see as flawed resonates with millions of people. You can ask what connects an audience to a film beyond technical perfection. You can be a critic who tries to understand why something works instead of just pointing out why it doesn't. The bar was completely silent now. This wasn't just a funny story anymore. This was a masterclass. I've been making films for 60 years, Clint said. I know my limitations. I know I use the same facial expressions. I know my plots can be predictable. I know my dialogue isn't always Sorkin-level clever. But I also know that people connect with the work. There's something in those flat characters and weak dialogue that reaches people. Your job as a critic isn't to tell me I'm wrong for making those choices. Your job is to figure out why those choices work for audiences, even when they don't work for you. David was crying now. Not from embarrassment, though there was plenty of that, but from the realization that Clint Eastwood had just given him the most important lesson of his career in a dive bar while letting him trash his entire filmography. Can I quote you? David asked through tears. For the piece, Clint smiled. Sure, but attribute it properly. According to some old guy I met at a bar who turned out to be Clint Eastwood, the bar erupted in laughter again. The tension broke, and suddenly David was laughing too, a kind of hysterical can't believe this is happening laugh. David Chen published his review 3 weeks later. It wasn't the hit piece he'd planned. Instead, he wrote a 5,000-word essay titled, "The Night I Told Clint Eastwood His Work Was Overrated," to his face. A lesson in critical humility. The essay went viral. Not because it was a takedown, but because it was honest. David detailed the entire conversation, including all the criticisms Clint had agreed with, but he also included Clint's lesson. The criticism without understanding is just noise. The piece won David a job offer from a major film publication. In his interview for that job, they asked why they should hire him. His answer, "Because I learned the hard way that tearing something down is easy. Understanding why it works is the hard part, and I'm committed to doing the hard part." Today, David Chen is a respected film critic who writes thoughtful, nuanced reviews that explore both strengths and weaknesses of films. He tells the story of meeting Clint often, not as a funny anecdote, but as a teaching moment about the responsibility that comes with criticism. And at the Rusty Nail, Mike the bartender still tells the story to anyone who will listen. I've been serving drinks for 30 years. I've seen celebrities, politicians, criminals. But I've never seen anything like the night Clint Eastwood sat at my bar for 3 hours agreeing with a stranger about how overrated Clint Eastwood is. The 20 people who were there that night still talk about it. Some of them have told the story so many times that it's taken on mythical proportions, but the core of it remains true. Clint Eastwood, one of the most iconic filmmakers in history, spent an evening at a dive bar having an intellectually honest conversation about his own flaws, never once getting defensive, never once pulling rank, just engaging with criticism like a professional who understood that his work, like all work, was open to debate. If this story of anonymous debate becoming legendary lesson, of a critic meeting his subject without knowing it, and of humility that turns embarrassment into education moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with critics, creators, or anyone who's learned that the ability to accept criticism is a greater sign of confidence than the need to defend against it. Have you ever criticized someone's work without realizing you were talking to the creator? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible true stories about grace under fire and the wisdom that comes from not taking yourself too seriously.